Good evening, and welcome to WANA Live, the reading series of the Writers Association of Northern Appalachia. I'm your host, Damian Dressick, and this is your other host,
Christina Fasonic. How are you, Damian?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. We are surviving the ice apocalypse. I love Rick Moody, but I never wanted to live inside of one of his books.
I totally can understand that. It is in Wheeling now. It's getting ready to turn to freezing rain. So the temperatures are almost at 32 now. And it's been raining since about 6:30 a.m. So there's a lot of water to become ice here shortly.
I hope you are stocked up and not planning to leave the house.
Oh, yeah, we're always stocked up in one way or the other, you know. So before I introduce our writer tonight, I'm wearing what I'm now calling my Fruit Loops hat tonight, and I just want to give a shout out to my friend Aaron Hardy, who generously donated 50 hand-knitted hats to a local Wheeling charity that helps people who are homeless and in need of warm things. And she sewed all these hats, knitted them, crocheted them, and I said, but Aaron, you live in Florida now. And she's like, I know. So the people of the Wheeling area are benefiting from her generosity and her warm hats. Anyway, so we do have a writer on tonight who has been on our show before. And we love having her back because she has a new book coming out next month. Let me introduce
her. I've heard about this. This new book is from WVU Press, is it not?
Yes, it is. And I'm really excited about reading it. I've read reviews of it. I've talked to people who have read like advanced copies and all this, but I haven't got to read it yet. And I know you'll want to read it too. So Neema Avashia, who's on tonight, was born and raised in southern West Virginia, go West Virginia, to parents who immigrated to the United States. She has been a history and civics teacher in the Boston Public Schools since 2003. Her essays have appeared in publications such as The Bitter Southerner, Catapult, Kenyon Review Online, and Lithub. Her first book, Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place, will be published next month by WVU Press. So let's bring Neema on to talk about her book.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Good evening. It's so nice of you to make time to be here.
I'm excited to be here with you. It was lovely to read with you last time, and I'm psyched to be back again.
Yeah, this is great. So are you reading from the new book tonight, I hope?
I am reading an essay from the book, which I have here with me. I'm not good at the angles, but it's right there.
Oh, that's great. That is a terrific cover. I love it.
Thank you. So that cover is a photo of my sort of adopted family growing up in the Charleston area in West Virginia. There are about 100 Indian families in the area. And so it's a picture of a bunch of us at Babcock Mill. But yeah, I'm going to read an essay to you tonight that has not been published previously. So you'll get a sneak peek into one of the essays in the collection. And it's a hermit crab essay. It's a list. It's a list essay.
Nice.
All right. I'm excited. It's one of my favorite things about the show. It's like going into art galleries and you see like, oh, this is new. Like I'm the first person seeing this. It's not like canonized in some museums. So I'm really excited. We'll be the first people to hear this essay.
Yes. You will.
Very cool. Okay. We're going to disappear and let you get to it.
All right. So this essay is called A History of Guns. 10. The number of guns in my neighbor's gun rack on Pamela Circle. On occasion, after our post-school snack of pickle sandwiches and pudding cups, his son and I took them out of the cabinet in his den. We huddled in the wood-paneled basement, stroked the burnished metal on the barrels, ran our fingers over the honeyed grain of the stocks. These guns, antiques made and used 100 years before my parents set foot on the tarmac at JFK after their first transatlantic flight, held me in their thrall. They were beautiful, majestic, something to collect the same way we hoarded the Indian head pennies and arrowheads we found on our walks in the woods. Something I knew would never be found in my immigrant parents' home. Guns were too American for our nerdy, Gandhi-loving Indian family. I might turn them in my hands, wrists slightly bent by their heft, for brief moments on lazy afternoons, but I knew they would never be mine. 9. The number of years I've been teaching the Second Amendment to my students in Boston and trying to explain its continued relevance in this era of extreme gun violence. I try to be the bridge between red and blue. I channel my West Virginia roots and neighbors to conjure the pro Second Amendment arguments, but my Massachusetts liberal students are born and raised in an echo chamber, and many have seen the impacts of gun violence firsthand. They have a response every time. We need the Second Amendment to prevent government tyranny, I say. And kids say, have you seen what's happening in Syria? Guns don't stop tanks and bombs. I say, we need the Second Amendment because people love to hunt. And kids say, you couldn't eat a deer killed by an AR 15. Every bite would be filled with shrapnel. I say, we need the Second Amendment for personal protection. And kids say, you don't need an AR 15 to protect yourself from a home invader. And though I grew up with guns, though guns did not frighten me when I was a child, I too read the Boston Globe every day, watch the homicide count in my city tick higher and higher, and think, they are right, they are right, they are right. 8. The number of miles between my house and Camp Virgil Tate, a massive span of grass and woods where I learned to fish and identify edible plants like sumac and milkweed and spot poison ivy and shoot a bow and arrow and load, aim, fire, reload. Holes riddled the edges of the paper target. Stalks of hay flew off the bale it was pinned to, but my aim never improved to the point where I even hit the outer circles of the target. Unsurprising, coming from a kid who couldn't cut with scissors, jump rope, or draw a straight line to save her life. Unnecessary, too, for a vegetarian with no intentions of hunting. And yet, there is this part of me that feels that I have failed, that the inability to accurately load, aim, fire, reload is further proof that I am an imposter in this place where I was born, but I'm never quite sure I belong. 7. The number of minutes from my house on Pamela Circle to the spot on Goff Mountain Road where my father dropped off the squirrels and rabbits he lured with peanut butter and trapped in metal cages to prevent them from destroying his garden. I'm taking them to Goff Mountain College, he told me. Someday you'll go there too. Meanwhile, our backyard neighbor sat on the grass in the evenings shirtless, with a rifle perched between his legs. The squirrels and rabbits that entered his yard got shot, not trapped. Last year, when a squirrel, I named him Simon, invaded my house, waking me each morning with his gnawing of wood, covering my porch with his urine and feces, leaving pieces of pizza crust out on the railings, I found myself filled with unexpected, murderous rage. I knocked him off the railing once with a broomstick. He fell 2 stories, hit the ground with a thud, and then blithely scampered away. I explored trapping, but learned that wildlife traps are illegal in Massachusetts. And inexplicably, I began to think about my neighbor and his gun. I, vegetarian, Hindu, raised as a pacifist, with terrible aim, fantasized about shooting Simon. What would I look like sitting on my back porch in Boston, a gun perched on my lap, waiting for the squirrel to scurry onto the scene? Please don't, Laura said. You do that here, and someone is going to call the police on you in minutes. 6. The number of chambers in the pistol my down the street neighbor, just out of high school, used the night he played Russian roulette and lost, sending a bullet slamming into his own brain. I was in middle school at the time. He once helped us build a deck off the side of my friend's clubhouse, a hodgepodge of plywood and wood scraps brought home from the lumber company his dad owned. Compared to my scrawny self, he was the big kid with the hammer, and I still see him straddling the beam, hammering away at a piece of plywood, a white baseball cap on his head, cradling the tender brain that would implode just a few years later. 5. The number of minutes away I was from Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh on October 27th, 2018, when a gunman entered the sanctuary, murdered 11 people, and injured 6 more. In town for our 50th anniversary celebration of the creative writing department at Carnegie Mellon, I spent those morning hours locked in a basement on campus, my mind completely taken up with questions about who was at the synagogue that day, which professors, which neighbors from my time living in Squirrel Hill, which expat West Virginians now living in Pittsburgh might be affected. We tried to carry on with the reading. I awkwardly shared the story I'd planned to read all along, one about a nighttime outing with young people where we used graffiti to grieve the loss of their peers to gun violence. Wondered at its wild inappropriateness or its fitting appropriateness for this painful moment. I called Laura during a break to tell her where I was, to explain the shelter in place. She asked me, "Love, are you okay?" I did not know how to answer her, how to explain that my body and brain still have not adjusted to an America where guns outnumber people, where guns are not Indian head pennies or arrowheads, but rather weapons of a war we wage on each other. 4. The number of times we practice containment each year at my urban middle school in Boston, once per term. We've perfected the routine. Close the blinds, lock and cover the door, place a green sign in the window if all students are accounted for, a yellow one for missing students, a red one if anyone is injured. Text the administrators a picture of the class attendance. Huddle in the corner, jam between the sink and the garbage can, with 28 adolescents desperately trying to keep quiet, or 24 adolescents trying to stay quiet, and 4 farting, burping, and doing anything they can to get their peers' attention. My students have so many questions about these drills. Would we really stay locked in the room if we heard gunshots? What would we do if the shooter came through a side door? What about the rooms whose doors do not lock? Aren't we teaching potential school shooters in our midst all of our strategies and plans by practicing these drills again and again? 3. The number of shots fired at Angel, the sweetest of students, just 15 years old, killed on a street corner in South Boston at 11:30 p.m. 4 Novembers ago. The 4th beloved young person to die by gunshot that year. The 4th funeral I attended where I outlived the person in the casket by a full 2 decades. He baked me a fruitcake at Christmas the year I taught him. 2 shots to the head, 1 shot to the neck. 0, the number of times I want to see, hear, or touch a gun again. Thank you.
Wow, that was. Christina looks like she's in shock.
No, I'm not in shock. I'm good.
So.
Can you see me?
Mhm.
Am I moving?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm not in shock. Normally I'd let Damien go first, but I'm not. I really love the complexity of this piece because it's not black and white. It's not guns are bad. It's not guns are good. It's here we are at this moment in time in this country trying to grapple with tradition and heritage and politics and the real life, human value of a living human being, all with this instrument, the gun. When you opened this piece and you talked about, was it your neighbor who had all the guns?
Mm-hmm.
That was as a West Virginian, that was just a way of life. I was telling my students this story the other day about my great grandfather just going over to the corner and getting a gun and shooting it out the front door. And that wasn't unusual because there were always guns, like leaning against the closet door, propped against the dresser or something. I mean, it was a part of life. But at the same time, like, I would never own a gun. So how do we sort out this deeply complex issue? And it's not, you can't just say no or yes, but there has to be some other solution. That was such a beautiful, complex way of looking at this issue. It was awesome.
Thank you. I mean, do you want to go or do you want me to respond? I don't know.
No, please respond.
I mean, I think that's actually like I would say that's the thing that's probably the most dominant theme, or one of the most dominant themes in the book, is that like things are complicated. And we live in a time where people don't want things to be complicated. They want everything to be really binary. Like it's either good or it's bad. It's either right or it's wrong. It's either allowed or it's banned. Everything is really polarized. And I think as somebody who grew up in a place that's very different than the place that I live now, I feel like I often find myself kind of looking both ways and being like, well, these are very different worlds and their belief sets that are based on like where people are located and what their lives look like. And their lives look really different from each other. So me learning how to shoot a gun at a camp 8 miles from where I grew up, like when I tell my students that here in Boston, they're like, you held a gun, like you know how to shoot a gun. And I'm like, well, not well, but yes, I did learn how. Like it was like a thing you did. Like you learned to shoot a bow and arrow, you learned to shoot a gun, you learned to fish. Like, I don't know, we also learned to square dance. We did a lot of things that are very different than what happened here. But I think that we need to be able to kind of like hold those things together or beside each other, or help people see that like our location really informs what we believe, but that doesn't mean that our belief is like the only belief. And like I think people are sometimes so immersed in like their belief that they can't see outside of that. And that's, I think, a thing I'm trying to grapple with a lot in the book.
No, I was just having a conversation with someone today about this idea that we have become so thoroughly siloed in terms of the voices we hear. I mean, I know you mentioned the idea of an echo chamber, talking about students in Massachusetts, and having also lived a lot of places, it very much. I really love the structure of what you were doing, and also the kind. I mean, I wanted to ask, like, when you were considering the kinds of things you picked for your list, was this kind of, and maybe I don't want to go too far behind the curtain if you don't want to either, but
no, okay.
But was this like kind of, you sort of knew what you were gonna hit on, or did these come to you as you were working? Like, I mean, like, when you start talking about the tree of life, and then the squirrel. I mean, there's a wonder, and so there's tragedy, there's humor, there's mundanity, and the sort of looking back into the past with these like sort of Civil War relics. Like, how did you select what you were bringing to us to give consideration to?
I think that, I mean, it really started after Tree of Life. Like, I think that was that experience of being very close and also feeling very close to that community. Just having known lots of people who were members of that community, really just made me think about the distance I've traveled in the way I orient towards guns, right? The way I sort of understood them as a child versus like how I feel about them, having now lost students to gun violence, having now experienced like people close to me being victims of a mass shooting. I think when I started to reflect on like my trajectory, I realized that there was like this series of experiences that had started like that what had started in early childhood as like curiosity, it had actually really been shifting over that time, like having a neighbor who committed suicide using a gun, like those things I think were in my mind and were shaping and forming my thinking. But it took sort of hitting this very intense point, and then saying, well, like, what does it mean about me, and what does it mean about my childhood? What does it mean about how I've understood this idea that I could travel such a distance in my thinking about this issue? And so then it was about sort of going back and thinking about those moments, like what are the moments that I've had in my life where guns have been really salient. And there were moments in childhood that were salient in a really different way. And then the further I got into my adulthood, the more difficult and complicated those feelings about guns became.
So I thought the call and response part where you're talking to your students and they're, giving you these rebuttals was very interesting, because where I live in West Virginia, it would have been the reverse. The students would have been saying what you were saying.
The teacher would have been
saying what the students were saying. It would have been completely reversed. And the same thing is true at my university in Pennsylvania. So I thought that really highlighted what you said about place and the culture of a place and the role that guns play in that culture. Yeah, I mean, I really love this. I can't wait to read the whole book. I mean, I can't wait until it comes out. And it's on pre-order, right?
It is on pre-order. You can pre-order it from any independent bookstore, but especially if you're in West Virginia or Pennsylvania, I would say, White Whale is an amazing option. Taylor Books in Charleston is a really great option. You can also order it directly from WVU Press on their website. And yeah, it's available for pre-order. It officially comes out on March 1st. And I'll be in Morgantown and Pittsburgh the weekend of March 18th to sort of like launch it in its Appalachian form.
Yes, you were saying to us in our virtual green room that you are going to be having a launch event at a local bookstore.
I
on
am. So
Friday night.
yeah, March 18th, which is Friday night at White Whale Books, will be the Northern Appalachia launch of the book.
Cool. Can you hold this up one more time?
Yeah, I'll
Look at
try.
it, they see it.
Wah! There we go.
Northern Appalachia, coming up, queer and Indian in a mountain place. Neema Avashia, WVU Press.
And to everybody out there, you told us that was Babcock State Park, right? That was on the cover. And if you haven't been there, go visit. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. We do have some commentary that Damien just put on the screen.
Good.
From Joe Shearer, who watches a lot. She says, the mix of humor, sadness, and honesty is so effective. A great use of the list form. Well done. So
thank you.
Some positive commentary. Yeah, this was so wonderful. We're so glad you came on and joined us once again. It's been a while. I think you were in sort of that first year that WANA Live was on, right, Damien?
Yes. And then I also wanted to point out, if you can, in Morganton, Pittsburgh, Neema, you are going to be at a conference coming up in March.
I am. Yeah, so Appalachian Studies Association Conference. I'll be there presenting with a bunch of other Appalachian writers during the conference as well. Yes. We have a session on Friday.
Damien and I will also be presenting too, but we present on Saturday. So we encourage everybody to come to that. I'm glad. Yes, I'm glad we'll be in person. Again, at least at this moment in time, they plan on being in person. So people should come. It's always an affordable conference, and it's at WVU's campus. So it should be a wonderful event.
The lineup of options is pretty amazing. There's a lot of phenomenal sessions. I couldn't even start to pick from them. There were so many good ones.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Neema, for coming on the show tonight. Loved your work. Looking forward to reading the book.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So we will see everybody next week, same time, 8 p.m. And thanks again for watching. Have a great night, y'all.